Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wood, can you please elaborate on why the Biden administration rescinding important ESA reforms made by the Trump administration that modernized the ESA, including the regulatory definition of habitat, are misguided and bad for rural America?
Sure. As I discussed in my written testimony and discussed today, the only place critical habitat can really provide value is areas where the land triggers that federal nexus. It's going to require a federal permit to damage existing habitat features. It cannot serve to encourage the restoration of habitat or the active maintenance of habitat. Rescinding the Trump's definition of habitat, which we had some disagreements with on the margin, but was overall correct in saying habitat is only those areas suitable for a species, serves to make it easier to designate precisely those areas where critical habitat doesn't work, and worse, creates perverse incentives by making the potential to establish habitat a liability for landowners.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to you in just a second. Director Williams, should the gray wolf be delisted in the lower 48?
Mr. Chair, Congresswoman Boebert, and we are in the midst of petitions and litigation on that very issue.
Would you agree that they need to be delisted?
When they meet the 5 criteria of
So
the
there are
Endangered
over
Species
6,000
Act, yes.
wolves in the lower 48 United States, and the initial agency recovery goal was 650 wolves. So both Obama and the Biden administrations have supported delisting the gray wolf, including when Mr. Ashe was director. It shouldn't take an act of Congress or more than a decade to delist a recovered species. So I would say that it has met that criteria, and you're saying once it meets that criteria, then yes, it should be delisted. And I would say that this takes away from our precious resources from other species that actually need our help that are on the Endangered Species Act. And Mr. Wood, back to you. Are you aware of a statutory provision that authorizes Fish and Wildlife Service to require mitigation under Section 7?
Nothing that explicitly requires it, but under Section 7, they have to consult over federal projects.
Okay, or do you agree that Section 7 does not include the words mitigation or offsets, and such requirements for Section 7 were never authorized by Congress?
I believe with the first part, from what I understand, often mitigation is proposed by federal agencies as a way to avoid more extensive consultation, so there's some uncertainty there, but you're right that the words, I believe, don't appear in that section.
Thank you. Director Williams, why did Fish and Wildlife Service not allow public review and not allow public comment for its recently released ESA compensatory mitigation policy?
Mr. Chair, Congresswoman Boebert, I follow the Administrative Procedures Act, the law, when we put forward any rulemaking, and I don't believe that the APA applies to mitigation policies. So we did follow the law in putting those forward.
Why is it that the Fish and Wildlife Service is proposing to burden landowners with onerous ESA-related prohibitions when the agency has insufficient information to support a listing of the dune's sagebrush lizard?
Mr. Chair, Congresswoman Boebert, indeed, I have spent a long time, a career of working even on the dune sagebrush lizard. I'm looking at my previous colleague, Mr. Ashe, and the science was very clear on the dune sagebrush lizard. In fact, I brought with me the proposed listing. What happened with dune sagebrush lizard is for many years, it's an example of the positive conservation outcomes of the possibility of a listing happening. That didn't happen, and could be extinct in all of their range.
So I would say this is yet another species of whom it appears the Fish and Wildlife Service is basing a listing decision on the precautionary principle. The service appears to be speculating about the future trends, even while admits it can't be certain because of the species habitat and it's on private lands.
If that's a question, Congresswoman Boebert, indeed, a threatened status talks about foreseeable future, but endangered status does not. Those are threats before us right now to the dune sagebrush lizard
As long as we could get the
habitat.
actual recovered species off of the list, then I think we can make a lot of progress. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Thank you, Chair.